Now, so far, we've only worked with a single video and a single audio track. However, within our sequence, we actually have 3 video and 3 audio tracks, meaning we can layer videos on top of each other and we can also layer audio clips on top of each other. If you make the video track a little bit bigger, you should see that each video clip has this horizontal line. This represents the opacity or the opaqueness of this layer. Right now, this is 100% opaque, so you can't see through it. But you can, just like you could with the audio levels on the audio clips, you can click on this opacity line and drag it down to lower the opacity to maybe 50%. Now it looked like the clip just got darker, but that's because this is the only video, there's nothing underneath it. So making this more transparent just makes it see-through and what's underneath it is just black. So let's bring this back up to 100% and let's layer something else on top of this one. Over on the left hand side. And again, feel free to grab any clip that you want. I'm going to grab this glass ceiling.mp4, drag it into my sequence. But what I'm going to do is I don't want it at the end. I actually want it on top of my entrance, and it's also got an audio track, which is going to be on audio track 2. So I'm actually going to drop it at the very beginning here, but on video track 2 and audio track 2. Let's let go. If I rewind and play this back. Whoa, that is a little bit chaotic. So I'm actually going to trim this clip in here, pull it to the very beginning, and let's trim the end just so it kind of sits exactly over this entrance.mp4. And if you scrub through this, well, we can't actually see the entrance.mp4 because the glass ceiling layer is on top and everything below that is hidden. Let's just make the timeline a little bit bigger and expand this V2 layer. And there's that horizontal line. Let's just zoom in a little bit. Let's drag this horizontal line on this glass ceiling down to maybe 50%. So now the glass ceiling is 50% see-through and you can see the entrance clip underneath. Let's rewind and play this back. And that's a pretty trippy effect. Let's select the glass ceiling.mp4 and come up into the effect controls. Under the video category, you will find an option for opacity. And this is exactly what we're controlling with that white line. You can see the opacity is set to 57.1%. If I lower that to, let's say, 30, you can see that this horizontal line has moved down. My clip is a little bit more see-through, and the opacity of this clip is now 30%. Also, just for the time being, let me just mute my audio tracks again because I don't want them to interfere with the recording of this course. Let's rewind just a little bit. And in the effect controls, within the opacity category, under opacity, you'll find a blend mode. And this determines how this video that sits on top of the entrance, our glass ceiling, is blended onto that video layer below. If you pop this open, there's actually quite a lot of different options in here, and each of them will look slightly different. Right now, it's set to normal, so it just looks normal, but because our opacity is 30%, it's 70% see-through. But let's just come down. Let's, for example, choose linear dodge or additive. That will blend this layer on top very, very differently. So the style looks quite different. Let's pop this open again and maybe let's choose overlay. Again, a very, very different effect. Now, I won't go through the technical detail of all of these different options, but just know that there are different ways to layer videos on top of each other, both managing the opacity, like how see-through a layer is, but also how it's being blended onto the video layer below. But now let's just come up, set this back to normal, and let's set the opacity up to 100% so we can't actually see through it. Now sometimes, especially if you're doing gaming videos, for example, you may want to just add a little insert of yourself, a second clip that just sits in the corner. For that, rather than managing the opacity, you may want to manage the motion, the position, scale and rotation of that clip. Right now the clip is at 100% size, it takes up the entire screen and therefore blocks everything that sits underneath it. However, you can change the scale, so you can either click and drag or you can enter a number on this scale. So let's just bring that down to maybe, let's say, about 45. And you can now adjust the position by clicking and dragging here in the effect controls. But you can actually also just click onto the layer itself, avoid clicking on the center, that just moves the anchor point. Click on the layer in your program monitor and then you can move it, let's say over to the left hand side. You can also click and drag on the corners to scale it in, or if you go out a little bit, you can rotate it as well. So you kind of place your video layer wherever you want to. And this can be really great for just blending in clips of people talking or yourself if you're doing a tutorial or a gaming clip or anything like that. So let's rewind and play that back. Cool, we now have this layer blended on top of our entrance. Let's reset everything we changed in the motion properties for this layer. And for that, make sure the clip is still selected on your timeline. Come into the effect controls, and next to the motion section over on the right hand side, you'll find this reset effect button. Let's click that. That's going to reset everything under motion. So we're back to where we started. But I still want to see the entrance through it. However, rather than making the top one smaller, more see-through, or blending it differently, I can also use masks. Under the opacity category, you will find 3 tools: an ellipse mask tool, a 4-point polygon mask, as well as a pen tool. Now, if you click any of these, this will allow you to draw a mask on your layer within the program monitor to define where this layer is visible. For example, let's click onto this ellipse mask button. This is going to add an elliptical mask onto your opacity, and you can now, in the program monitor, click and drag this around. You can click the corners and drag this out. You could also scale it out a little bit, and we're now essentially defining a mask where that layer is visible. If you come into the mask properties, it has a mask path. You can actually track that. We're not going to get into that. It's also got a mask feather, and if you bring up the feather amount, that's going to make the edges softer, so it's kind of blending the outer edges of that mask. It's also got a mask expansion, so you can push that out or pull that mask in, depending on your preferences. And you can actually add multiple masks. So if you reselect the opacity, and let's add another mask, like the 4-point polygon, this is going to add a second mask onto this layer, which again, you can now modify and do whatever you want with, so you have full control over where your layer is visible. In order to delete any of the masks in your effect controls under opacity, just select the mask and hit delete on your keyboard. That's going to delete that mask. And do note that even if your layer has masks, you can still change the opacity overall, or you can change the blend mode to anything that you want. So you have full control over how video layers are blended together, and there's no limit to how many you can lay on top of each other. Let's grab this hallway reveal MP4. Drag and drop that into the timeline. I'm going to drop that onto video layer 3 and audio layer 3. Press C to select the razor tool. I'm going to trim off that end. V for the selection tool, select that piece and delete it. Again, I'm going to mute the audio track for that. So there's now yet another layer. Let's select this one, and you can either play with the opacity to lower that a little bit, or let's change the blend mode to add. And let's rewind and play that back. Now that is getting pretty trippy, but this is just meant as an example to show you what you can do in Premiere Pro. Now, if you want to layer even more video tracks or even more audio tracks on top of each other, you can simply add more tracks. For that, simply right click either onto the video or the audio tracks and select to either add a single track or add tracks ... and then you can define how many video and how many audio tracks you want to add, and they'll extend your timeline, and you can add as many as you need. Let's cancel that because I actually think we have plenty. Now, let's say I want to leave these video layers overlaid because I kind of like that effect. It's a bit trippy, but it kind of works. But I want to get rid of these additional audio tracks that we have here at the bottom. I really just want the audio track from the entrance clip. So I need to unlink this audio and this video layer. And for that, I can right click onto that layer and select to unlink. That's now going to separate my video and the audio layer. So now I can delete just the audio. Let's select the one at the bottom, right click, select to unlink. By the way, it's Control or Command and L to link or unlink. I'm just going to delete that audio track as well. Let's zoom out and let's just add a bit of music into this whole thing. Let's come back to the footage bin. Let's go into the YouTube audio library folder. And these are just sound clips and music files that I've downloaded from the YouTube audio library. It's a free resource. You can get a whole bunch of cool stuff from there. So check that out and go crazy. I'm going to grab this bluemacaw.mp4. Grab it, drag and drop it into my sequence, and that's a pretty long audio file. As I said, it's a piece of music. I'm going to drop this on audio layer 2 because I want to leave my original audio that comes with the actual clip that I've recorded. Let's drop that in. I'm also going to unmute all of my layers, and let's just play this back from the dramatic moon forward. Now that is actually pretty cool. It immediately adds a whole new vibe to the entire video, and adding just subtle music into your videos will really spice up your projects. I'm just going to expand this layer a little bit. I'm going to make the music a little bit softer. It's a little bit too loud for me. So let's just drop this by maybe 8 or so decibel. Let's rewind, play this back one more time. Cool, that works really well. Now, besides music, the original sound clips that came with your video, you can also drop sound effects onto the additional audio track. So let's, for example, grab this distant thunder sound effect, drag and drop that onto audio track number 3. And there's a little bit of thunder happening here. Maybe I'll start this. You can see that on the audio waveform as well really nicely. This is where the thunder happens. So let's maybe have that happen during this dramatic mew. And I'm going to lower the volume already a little bit. Again, I'm kind of keeping an eye on this audio meter here. Make sure that that doesn't clip. So let's rewind and play this back. That is pretty cool. Now, if you have a keen eye, you may have noticed that this glass ceiling as well as this hallway kind of just pop in there. Same with this audio here. There's no fading in or fading out happening here. And yes, you can add video transitions to these clips to fade them in and audio transitions to these audio effects to fade them in as well. But there's a much easier way to animate video opacity, audio volume, or any of the effect parameters of the effects that we've applied to our video audio clips. And we're going to talk about how to do that in the next lesson.